My guest today has appeared on Comedy Central's and Access TV's Live at Gotham and was a finalist on Season 8 of Last Comic Standing. He's a former co-host of the Anthony Cumia show with Dave Landau and is now third chair on Louder with Crowder. I'm excited to welcome the King of Detroit, Dave Landau.
Hey, what's up, man?
Thanks for coming on, man.
Dude, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you've been having a busy couple days with the show. I've been keeping track a little bit. Are you still on high alert right now?
Yeah, we are, because right now we're not sure if there's going to be a mistrial or not while we cover this whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because they thought that there was going to be a verdict almost instantly yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I even said, I'm like, there's no way that jury is not going to try to get out of this
For
or at
sure.
least come up with something. And they're like, no, I think it'll be pretty quick. I'm like, okay. And then by like 5:30 today, they want to look at like certain evidence.
Yeah, video and laptop shit.
Yeah, from an app that was edited to use this picture, but it says in the like whoever I shouldn't say app, but whatever forensic group says don't use this in court. It doesn't say you can, but it's like you shouldn't use this in court. So
Okay.
that's what they want to use in court to prosecute. So it's all crazy. And I think honestly, I don't blame the jurors at all. I'm sure they're terrified of being doxxed and killed and everything else.
It's fucking crazy, man. Are you guys, you're on YouTube right now, right? Like, is it just sort of a back and forth constantly, or is it?
Yeah, we usually get thrown off for a week or so, but we don't really get any hard strikes because we can prove whatever information they said was false.
Yeah.
But we have to tread lightly because if we make fun of certain people, we can be pulled off. Kind of if we do anything, it's all arbitrary.
Yeah.
So they don't like him and they don't want him on there, but they can't actually pull him off, and he has 6 million subscribers, so they can't do it without people noticing.
It's fucking crazy.
Dude, it's crazy when big tech is against what you do. It really is a bizarre way to live.
There's 4 fucking companies that are calling the shots, right? And
that own everything.
It's crazy. But you and I work together. Like, you do the road pretty much every weekend, right?
Like 2 to 3 weekends out of the month, and the other weekends, usually just with my son, or if he's not down here during the week or whatever, we kind of go back and forth right now. But yeah, usually I'm either on the road, and if I'm not, I'm at birthday parties and baseball games and basketball and all that kind of stuff, which I actually love. So it's pretty cool.
That's rad. That's such a different vibe from fucking the show that you do and like comedy clubs and everything. I mean,
yes. Yeah. Well, I'm completely kind of irreverent on my show and, on stage. And yeah, really who I am, though. I'm really a dad. I'm calm. I don't know what I am.
Yeah. Well, that's what threw me off, because we worked together in Tacoma, and I feel like an asshole because before I worked with you, I didn't know of you, and I should have.
I wouldn't. No, you shouldn't have.
Well, because we both grew up in the Midwest, and there were several people that I came across afterwards. I was like, oh, I worked with this guy this past week, and he's really fucking funny, and he's like, a lot of them were like road dogs from the Midwest, and they all knew you, like Mike Merrifield from 800 Pound Gorilla.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
He was taping something, and he's like, that dude is the fucking man. Like he was.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And there are a bunch of people that have a ton of respect, like almost all comics. And I felt like an asshole because when there's someone like that has status like that, I'm like, man, I should know this guy's comedy more, which I enjoy your comedy.
Thank you. No, dude, it was awesome to work with you. I get that though. I've not been, I haven't really been on anything mainstream besides like even the mainstream stuff like This Is Not Happening or Gotham Live is sort of a niche market.
Yeah.
And then Last Comic was something that, it got me to sell out shows for 3 weeks. Then everybody forgot it existed. So it's like, comedy's kind of a small community, and people will remember you and know you from that. And I have a good reputation there.
For sure.
So, yeah, I know a lot of people in the business. It's just, and then I went on to the Anthony Cumia show. Then I went on to Crowder. So, there's still comics that I guess for lack of a better word, will disown me because of the political, shows that I'm on, regardless of, my opinion.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing is I've been in it for 17 years. So chances are, like, if anybody's been doing it for a long time, I've bumped into them at some point.
Yeah,
Like Mike, I've known for probably 15 years, easy.
dude, he had some. I want to have him on because he just has some stories about like fucking outfitting a minivan and doing like crazy road stuff all throughout the Midwest and just like going for it. And I know he did like the San Francisco comedy competition. He was he was just recording for them, and I was hanging out with him in the back of the room. He just had a really good ear for stuff we were talking about comedy, and then I didn't even know who he. I thought he was just like an audio guy. I'm like, this fucking
Yeah.
audio guy knows a lot about comedy, and turned out it was him. So, but
Yeah, Mike's been a great comic forever. Yeah, I met him in Appleton. It had to have been 15, 16 years ago.
mhm.
And yeah, he and I worked together. We did a small tour together for a while.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I knew him very well. We did a theater where we were going to put out a special, but contractually I couldn't do it once I signed with a different radio show.
Okay.
But yeah, dude, I've known Mike forever. He's a good guy.
Well, you started in the Midwest, right? Like you started in Detroit.
Yeah, I started at the well, I started in a lot of places, but Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle was the first place I went up, and then after that it was like Ann Arbor. And at the time there was probably like 10 or 11 clubs in the Detroit area
That's
where you could
crazy,
get up.
man.
Yeah, it was pretty cool though. It was really easy to like run around, and you get every audience you could be in front of. You could be in front of like you could get every version of a white or black audience, I should say.
Yeah,
That's pretty much the two categories of people in
in
that
Detroit.
area. Yeah,
But
yeah.
growing
There's not a
up,
lot of.
like before you got into doing it, like were you a hardcore comedy fan, or like what drew you into doing it?
I was not as much as with stand up. Like the half hour specials that started in the late 90s in Comedy Central were really appealing to me.
Hmm.
But I grew up watching, like, SNL was my thing. It was what I wanted
Okay.
to do. It's what I wanted to be. And I really got into SNL when I was a kid with like Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, like all of them, because I would buy the old tapes. And
Hmm.
then when like Chris Farley and Adam Sandler and those guys all came on, I was probably like 7 or 8 or 9 years old. And all my friends and I would like watch it. And my
Yeah.
dad would wake me up at like 11:30 every Saturday, and I'd watch it with him for an hour and a half. Like I loved it, man. Like it was everything, like music, sketches, like everything about it. I loved. Like I loved Jack Handy. I loved Tunes as the Driving Cat. Like some of the bizarre stuff from that time. But yeah, that's really what pushed me. And then when I was in high school, my dad got real sick, and long story short, I was a bad alcoholic and drug addict. And when I was 19, I went to the Second City in Detroit
Hmm.
and started taking classes in improv and sketch writing and all that stuff. And eventually I just thought I'd try stand up. And stand up I started making a living at really quickly.
Really?
Yeah, so I was like, I think I'll just do this because it pays, and I was still doing improv, still doing it with like a troupe, still doing it with
But
people that are.
what was your style like for that? Like, because if you were an alcoholic and like kind of a piece of shit, I
Yeah,
mean, what was your style at Second City?
I wasn't really uh too bad there. Like whenever I was on stage, I don't know, I always respected it. It was I mean, don't get me wrong, I drank a lot, and I'm sure there's stuff I said on stage and people that will deny that. But yeah, just various characters. It was always fun to just write sketches. Like I wrote a play with a couple people that we put out that ended up being the first show they did when they moved to a new location. It was called what was it? It was a Meet in the Middle, MEAT. And it was
Okay.
about how all the gay people and the straight people refused to live together in the same city, and it was a musical, so they had to move to different towns. So like Gay Town, like nobody could survive because like one was a florist and there was no guys to buy flowers for their angry wives. and like one of the straight guys, like his Subaru dealership went out of business because there was no lesbians to buy his cars. So, and it was a musical mixed with sketches in the middle, which is kind of how all those plays are. I mean, that's really what SNL was it was just Second City put on TV,
Oh, for sure.
with kind of a political theme, you know. And so we, at the time, that's what we had put out, and it was just incredible to do and to be a part of. And we did another one called the Devito Code, and that was just like a bunch of different sketches that were some of the first things I wrote, and they were all based on something that had happened in my life. Like when I dated an Indian girl whose family hated me, so I just wrote it as the reverse of that. There was a guy in our school. His name was Brick in our high school, and he would wear a beret and army fatigues to be a hall monitor. And I think he was in Nam, but he wasn't old enough to have been in Nam, so it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't Desert Storm either. So he would just like chase kids down and hurt them, and for some reason he was allowed to stay at our school. Like we used to like shake up pop bottles and throw them in his car and stuff, and watch him chase no one.
God
So I
damn.
just wrote a whole thing about just this like PTSD riddled hall monitor who had been killing kids. So like I based it all on stuff that I'd actually experienced. And then I just added the embellishment, and I loved it because you could just write something insane that was like 3 minutes long, 4 minutes long.
Dude, there's something about fucking Midwest shit where like I'm on the West Coast and like I'm working on this bit about how we would get high and go to Taco Bell and buy those Mexican pizzas and
Yeah.
then slam them on people's windshields and they'd freeze. And it was like the
Yeah.
funniest thing as like drunk 16-year-olds. And people like, you know, and there's just something about like that Midwestern, like you're bored, you're fucked up, you need to create something for you to do. And it's very like I think a lot of my sense of humor is similar to some of the stuff you describe where it's like I just don't see it as much on the West Coast. I think people are probably on the coast in general. It's like they're
No, I remember like you would go up to something like they have a mail slot in their door, right?
Mhm.
So you'd light a bottle rocket and then you'd run, and then you just hear it squealing all over the house and just see like lights flipping on.
This is
And
so terrible.
it's psychotic.
Oh yeah.
But it starts when you're a kid with like lighting dog shit on fire.
Dude,
So, because I remember, yeah, we almost burned down. Well, we didn't almost. I mean, we burnt down a porch because we found like a Kroger bag once. You know, they're like this giant paper bag, and we filled it with an entire bucket of shit from our friend's dog that was in the yard. And then we soaked it in gasoline and lit it on fire on this kid's porch. And we didn't stay to watch, we just ran. So like it melted their front door and burned down part of their porch because they were on vacation. So like we and like we were all like 11 or 10 or something at the time too. So we just all kept quiet about it until like 5 years ago.
oh my
So
god, dude.
at this point I'm like, I think enough time has passed. But we were friends with him, so he's like, I know it was you. I know you did it. We're like, nah, man, I don't know anything about that.
You didn't even tell him.
No.
That was the thing though, is you get that like hierarchy established and like 5 kids from the neighborhood and like the older
Yep.
ones are like the shot callers and then the younger ones are like the soldiers and you just find yourself doing some ridiculous shit. Like it was crazy. So you're around all that environment, all that shit. You're partying, you're drinking. You went to Second City. Like, didn't you do
Yeah.
like a contest or something? You were telling me about like that was the first time you did stand up.
No, it wasn't the first, but it was one of the first. And I did this. It was for Carnival Cruise, and the winner got it was $500 and or like 1,000, something like that, and a bunch of headline dates on Carnival. And then the second place got like 20 feature dates around the country.
Was Carnival at the time like a squeaky clean type gig?
Probably, maybe, I don't know. I think it probably was.
Okay.
I would assume it was. I mean, I wouldn't want to do a cruise ship now. I'd rather, just die. But any work was work, so I went out and I won.
Mm-hmm.
But they came up to me and they were like, "We can't have you on cruises, so we're just gonna have you take second and all the feature work." I was like, "All right." So they gave and they gave them the money and stuff too. I didn't care. I was like, "Oh, this is awesome. I
Yeah.
get to work." And I got 20 clubs from the East Coast all the way to the Deep South.
Damn.
Like 20 dates on my calendar, which is like, it's like immediately taking off your training wheels and being thrown into what it is to be a comic in the worst way. And also because you're going from like, God, there's a club called Rascals in New Jersey down to, comedy zones in Mississippi and Alabama and driving through the South, places I had never seen, um, never dealt with the people. Like, just, it was awful. Like, it was, some of it was good, but yeah, it didn't help my drinking.
What were you doing on stage at that point? Like, did you have an act or
I did. I had enough of an act where I would do well on stage. Some places where like the crowds were more intelligent, I did really well. Some places in the deep south like were definitely difficult, but every now and then I would have a really good show.
yeah.
And a guy named Henry Cho saw me, who was like really big. He does like churches now because I was real clean then.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought me on the road for about a year and a half where I ended up doing, more like gigs in the South and doing all that. So I just ended up being sort of a road dog where my pay would incrementally go up. Eventually I would bring other features, but for 13 years, all I did was tour around the country, and
Shit.
do the occasional TV spot. So I was just endlessly driving everywhere. I was putting 150,000 miles on a car in like a year, and
Jesus
just
Christ.
it was crazy, dude. Like but it was amazing. I mean, I really am thankful for all that. Like, I'm 39 now, and I can barely drive to the store without hurting. Which I know people are like that's young, but I don't feel young. I feel very old and broken.
But dude, those fucking even in this area, like I drive around. We have this weird network from uh like Everett to Spokane where like people just work this whole area and there's a lot of distance between there, but the lengths that comics will go for a gig is fucking crazy. I mean, luckily I think a lot of people have carved the path to where like it's reasonable compensation for the work
Yes.
itself, but in other places I'm sure it's not. It's like I can't imagine what those early days were like for you. And
Dude, I'm going from Michigan to, I don't know, like North Carolina, and I'm doing 4 shows and I'm making $250. I'm like, this is awesome. And I remember like one time I got my first headline date and I was probably like a month in. So,
oh shit.
well, yeah, like maybe like 6 months in. And it was at this place called Joey's in Dearborn. And the booker liked me. It was this guy who passed away last year named Bill Hildebrand. It was my first headline date, and it worked. I mean, I pulled it off every night. I faked it. Somehow I did enough crowd work and stuff to pretend that I had 45 minutes and trick an audience.
Yeah.
But they handed me $700 after it, and I was like, I've never seen so much money. Like, I couldn't even believe I was holding it in my hands, like that much money. And yeah, that was pretty cool. Like right after that, but for the most part, dude, yeah, it'd be like, do you want to drive here for $100? And it's like 6 hours away, and I'm like, yeah, just because I just want to get the experience
Oh,
and the
for
work,
sure.
and I somehow think I'm making money, so I print out my MapQuest directions and jump in my car and drive to the middle of nowhere.
That's fucking
And
crazy, man.
yeah, and it was all, I mean, so many different comics then too. Like a lot are still around, a lot are dead, a lot are have quit. Like you see people come and go in this business. It's pretty incredible.
Oh yeah. So how did you get good?
By
Because that's
doing, I think
did you
by
was it
doing that,
the road or was it like Mark Ridley's or because you were saying how Mark's was the first club in the country that implemented like the MC feature headliner format, and that's pretty
yeah.
much like the gold standard for clubs now. But like, did you come in when that was going on, or did you mainly just like learn by failing on the road?
He didn't fail that much, which was a good thing. And every now, I mean, granted, I bombed hard many, many times. Everybody does, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really failing in my mind because I learned that I wanted to be myself on stage and to keep pushing through who I was, as opposed to pandering to the like worst people imaginable. So you're in certain areas, and instead of like trying to get a rise out of a room of awful people, I would just still be me.
Hmm.
And a lot of people would just immediately cut to like, give it up for the troops. This is back when people, liked patriotism. That, just whatever quick thing you could go to, get an applause and
Hmm.
pander to the lowest common denominator and start doing hacky ass shit that wasn't, yours, wasn't anybody's, really, but it had just random material you'd hear every bad road comic do. Because there's really two kinds of road comics. One is the complete hack and failure and just sort of makes it because they can get laughs in a room and you don't have to pay them anything. And then there's dudes like Stuart Huff or Danny Bevins or these certain, this certain Mike Stanley is a great comic. Guy who used Matt McClowery. Like there's these comics out there that are just absolutely amazing. And the only reason why you don't necessarily know them is because of whatever fate has put them where they're at. Like there's really no reason you don't know them or reason to know them, but some of the greatest comics I've ever seen are nowhere remotely close to a household name. And then, of course, there's the reverse of that.
Oh yeah, dude. It's well, Matt's been on too, and his story's super interesting. He's one of the funniest fucking people. I I like people always give me shit because I kind of have like just dead eyes where I'm just like staring. And I
Yeah.
was talking to Matt about that when I met him, and I was like, "Yeah, I just had these fucking creepy eyes." And he looks directly at me. He goes, "What is that like?"
The first time I took him on the road, because I always thought he was funny, but that dude, he'd like look at his feet on stage
Really,
and he'd get laughs, but he was so dark, so much darker than he is now.
really.
And yeah, and I brought him on the road it was like 2008, and we were driving to Milwaukee to perform in a comedy club that was under a strip club. And I remember it was the last gig Billy Gardell did before he went to Mike and Molly, and it was like the gig where he was like, "I think I'm just gonna quit," and then he got the phone call that finally changed his career trajectory. But I remember we're driving, and Matt's just kind of staring at me, real nervous. I'm just chain smoking, and like the whole time he's just reading every sign because he's nervous. So for several hours, all I hear is Baymont, Denny's, Red Roof. Like, are you gonna kill me? Like, what is your fucking deal, man? And he told me his whole Asperger's story. I always knew there was something with him,
Yeah,
but yeah, now he's like my best friend. I've known him for forever,
he's
and
fucking
we've been going on
hilarious.
Oh, dude, he's brilliant, and he's a genuinely good person,
Yeah,
and you just don't meet a lot of them in life, and that's just even comedy aside. He's just a genuinely good human being.
for sure. Yeah, it's I that weekend with you guys. It's crazy because I have worked a lot of other weekends where that it's there's so much bullshit in entertainment, and that was actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about. You were touring the country. Like, how did LA end up happening? Like, why did you go there, and what was like what happened once you were there?
Well, that was different. Like the first time I went to LA, I was 19 and my dad had just passed, and I maybe like a year before. And I lost a bunch of my friends, or I should say a bunch, but I lost a couple people in a car accident
Oh
that
shit!
I cared a lot about. My friends and I were like, let's just move to LA. So we did. And the first time I went, it was like to kind of like take acting classes and do some like improv theater classes and everything. But it ended up just being me, him, and a guy who's now very high up at Marvel Studios. But he had an intern internship at Endeavor, which is now I think William Morris Endeavor. They may have spread apart, but it was the company that Ari Gold and Entourage was based on.
Oh shit.
So, dude, I would go get him for lunch, and all you would hear in that place was screaming. I'll never forget that. And he worked there in Red Lobster, and we all shared a apartment in West Hollywood. And we used to just like get in firework wars with these Asian girls that lived across the street, across like the back. So we'd be shooting like bottle rockets and Roman candles at each other, and like we did serious damage to these like
Oh
apartments.
yeah.
And then one day we drew on a bunch of plates, like Dave, Jimmy, and this other guy. Um, we're having a party on Glen Rock. Come hang out on Glen Rock and rock on Glen Rock, because that was the name of our street.
Hmm.
And it was like us drinking beer. We throw this party. We start playing a game called Plinko. I know this isn't what you were looking for, by the way, but
No,
I
no,
don't know why I
you're
had to
good.
tell this story. But we were playing this game called Plinko, where you know how like metal stairs will just go up like winding with the railing.
Yeah.
Where you were standing on top of the metal stairs and dropping beer bottles down, and every time you hit like a certain railing, like if you get all the way, it was 1,000 points. But on the way, like it'd be like 100, 200, 500, 1,000.
Uh huh.
And we were playing all night, so there was just like 3 feet of glass in
Oh
the
Jesus
stairwell.
Christ.
Like we destroyed this entire part. And then the next day, everybody, like one dude was at work, my buddy Jimmy was out looking for work, and I'm just sitting there and surrounded in just empty Tecate cans and shit. And I'm just hitting a pipe right when the landlord walks in, and I'm
Oh
like, oh
shit.
hey, yeah. And he's like, did you do this to my stairwell? I'm like, no, why?
Why would I
I
do
wasn't
that?
even here. And then he pulls out one of the stupid plate flyers we made and slams it on the table, and he's like, get out. I'm like, okay. So like the first time I went was supposed to be serious, but then the second time I went, I started doing stand up after that. And the second time I went was 2012, and
Hmm.
I got a manager who didn't do shit. And honestly, man, I had just I started getting in at clubs, but so many people had this ego where even though I was already at the clubs and known, they wanted me to start at the bottom again. Like
Okay.
it all of a sudden became, I don't know, very clear to me. It really bothered me, but there were some cool things I got to do. Like I got to open for Tim Allen at the Laugh Factory because he was promoting the new show Last Man Standing at the time, and I knew the woman who like kind of repped him, and I was able to get in with people. I was doing the Comedy Store a lot because of Sam Tripoli. He got me in, so I was going there. And but at the time, the Comedy Store wasn't popular because that Rogan Mencia thing just happened, where Rogan was banned.
Yeah, he split, so he was at like the
Yeah,
ice
so it
house
was
or whatever.
dead. Yeah, so it was dead.
Okay.
And the Ice House was awesome. It was always, still is awesome. I love that room. The guy who books it is incredible, dude. And but yeah, you'd be going up, at like 11 o'clock at night or 3 in the morning to like Hungarian immigrants and people that didn't know the language and bums, and you're like, this is great.
Yeah.
I love Hollywood. So I ended up writing all these scripts. Some of them kind of got looked at. I was supposed to go there to write for In Living Color, but the show got canceled.
Okay. And
Yeah, so that's why I ended up even going. And it got canceled before I was officially signed.
oh
So it
shit.
was like, hey, you I think we're gonna have you on this. Sean Agar, who was the producer, had kind of hired me. And so I got an apartment, moved out, and then it was canceled. And I never met Keenan for another 2 years until I was on Last Comic Standing. So I was like basically gonna be on this show that got canceled. So like my dreams were, yet again crushed.
And were
And I'll
you
never
still
for
drinking at the time, or were you?
No, I wasn't drinking at the time. I did have a relapse though, and I've talked about it, wherein I got real drunk one night because I was just depressed because that
I wonder
happened.
why. Yeah, it was
Right.
like everything that could go wrong is just
Did,
fucking
yeah.
you.
And this is like, I mean, that's 9 years ago now. So I mean, I say I've been sober since '09, but I did relapse a couple times, and this was one of them. And yeah, I was pissed drunk at a barbecue my friend was throwing. The same guy who worked for Endeavor, who was now at Fox Studios, who helped get me the job. It all helps who you know. And there's a very important female agent there at the time, like very high up in like the comedy world. And she was making burgers, and my friend was throwing a Boys in the Hood party. So I didn't know that he meant they were just going to have Boys in the Hood on. We thought it was a theme party. So I showed up dressed as Ice Cube and Boys in the Hood, and my two other friends showed up as characters from Boys in the Hood, which all of it didn't sit well with the extremely left Hollywood.
I wonder
So
why.
Yeah, it looked really good. So now I'm just drinking more because I realize what I've done. Anyway, so she's grilling, and like I forgot what she was making, but they were really good. And we were talking, and she was talking about In Living Color, and she's like, "Yeah, the show they couldn't make it. They just couldn't get it ready when we needed it. And I heard that you were going to be part of it, and blah." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." And she's like, "Yeah, they just, you would have deadlines and they couldn't meet them." And I just said, "Oh yeah, well, CP time. What are you going to do?" And I didn't mean it in a derogatory way. Literally, growing up in Detroit, my friends that were black would always say they were on CP time, which meant they were late, which was color people time. So I just assumed that was like okay to say, because it was always said to me. I never thought about it. I never thought that it was offensive. So she goes, what's CP time?
Oh,
And
God.
I said, I like a cigarette in my mouth. I go, it's color people time. And she gives me this look, walks over, and I realize she's with her partner. She grabs her little dog and leaves like furious. And I was like, oh shit. I think I just got a reputation there. And truthfully, I didn't know what I did. I had no idea, and I was 29 years old. I had no idea what I did. And I was like asking my friends, and they're like, yeah, dude, you can't say that. And I was like, why can't I say that? That's what they've always, every black dude I know says he's late because of CP time. Why can't I say it? And they're like, because you're not, it's colored people. You can't just say that in Hollywood. Everybody get all weird. I'm like, it was weird. It's very uncomfortable. So I didn't click, I didn't, it just didn't work for me. And I went back on the road where I was more comfortable.
Mhm.
Like the closest thing that I could do to what I always wanted to do, which was SNL, was In Living Color. And I loved In Living Color as a kid. It's exactly the kind of sketches I write, exactly the kind of irreverence I put in. And that would have been perfect. But truthfully, I don't know. It just felt like there was nothing there for me, which sucked because my whole life I loved movies and I loved all kinds of things about LA. I
Yeah.
really did. But there's just eventually a point where you realize it's not really a place as much as it is a state of mind.
Yeah. And
And
so,
ego is a fragile thing.
those fucking people suck too, dude. It's just like
That's
they're
my
just
point.
not cool. Like, I don't know. There's
They would stab you for anything. They would shove you out of the way to get in. They're not there to help you. No one cares. There's
it's
no real
money too.
love.
It's just money is the only thing they give a shit
Yeah.
about. It's fucking
Well,
crazy.
and they don't have real identities. There's no pulse there to put their finger on. That's why every show you see is just this mishmash of 900 different sexes and colors, because they're like, do you like this?
Yeah, the
Is this good enough for
sociology
you?
textbook cover. It's just
Yeah, it's
fucking
just yeah, just a complete brochure for a community college, and that's what every sitcom is. It's like, oh yeah, Blackish. That's like, dude, that's not a new concept. I grew up with the Fresh Prince.
yeah.
Like, you're not doing anything that's unique and original. You're just putting a stamp on it that makes it dumb.
It's you can't have like the corporate money mesh with what real comedy is. It's just not, it never will work because in order for it to be comedy, like you have to be able to play in that space where it's offensive and it's kind of dirty or whatever. And that's not HR, like that's once you bring HR to I mean, it's just not reality. That's why people like comedy too, is it's a break from that shit. It's crazy.
You're supposed to hear stuff that goes against what's popular. I mean, that's Colin Quinn had a great joke about that when I saw him live doing his one man show. And Colin's a really, really, really good dude and very funny. And one of his jokes in his one man show is people say, well, why don't you do more about, like the Black Lives Matter, transgender movements? He's like, yeah, because that's why I got into comedy. It was to solidify social norms or to reinforce social norms.
Exactly.
And I love that because it shouldn't be that. It should be, it doesn't mean you have to put anybody down or punch low or whatever, but at the same time, why can't you? It's comedy. It's seriously just, that's all it should be, is something that if you're laughing at something someone says, then that's the function of it. There's no rules.
There's so many layers of context too. Like somebody like Matt McClowry, like he can get people laughing on so many different levels that would be different than someone like you or me, or you can't break it down to anything besides just the individuality. So it doesn't, to even set those expectations is ridiculous. Like it's fucking crazy. So
Well, the idea of comedy now, which the one thing I love is I don't know Tim Dillon, but I know he's funny, and I see in him and Rogan and other people. The reason why they're hated on is because, I mean, even the show I'm on, Crowder, is because they beat the system. They didn't have to wait for a yes. They didn't have to stand there and hope they got a TV show. I mean, Rogan did, but he's not necessarily. News radio was brilliant, but he did like the Man Show, and then was like MMA, which is what he does. But they beat the system. That's why they have been trying to take them. It seems like the Hollywood narrative and the media have been trying to take them down for years. Rogan specifically.
Oh yeah.
And that's just how it's been, because they can't grasp the fact that he was able to get that far without agreeing with everything they say. I mean, the idea that any comic isn't liberal is kind of weird, because we do fall into that category no matter what. It's just being liberal has changed so drastically, and that you can't even identify with it anymore as a comedian.
It's crazy. And you look at what those guys are doing too. They just they went straight to the consumer. Like it's not that complicated. Like it's if these people are going to build all these gates and infrastructure, there's no way for you to go through it unless you check all these boxes. There's a workaround, and like you said, it pisses people off. And like, I mean, can we talk just like, how did you end up at Crowder, by the way? Like weren't you in New York, or because it's a
I had gone to New York because I became the third mic on the Artie and Anthony show, which was Artie Lang and Anthony Cumia.
Okay.
And they both liked me. And again, that's like another, like, training wheels is off. I'm now on a show with two legends, and Artie's had his struggles. So,
a couple,
one or two. And so we'll see if he remembers me. But he was on our show. And when he left, it became Anthony and I, and Anthony, I loved. I really, he is, he's the funniest person in broadcasting, probably.
How was that working with somebody that just had such a huge reputation, or not, like, you knew him, right? That show was huge, and to go from like not doing anything like that to then working with him, was it just?
Dude, I was driving around the country listening to Sirius XM and ONA. That's how I got into them. I never knew them on terrestrial or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Artie, obviously, when he was on Howard Stern. But it was incredible, because I remember when Anthony got fired from the show, I'm like, oh, man, that would be awesome if there was a show one day with me and Anthony. I said that to people, if they said, if you could do anything in comedy. Yeah. And I never in a million years. And then my friend Bob got on it, and I was like, hey, you think you'd recommend me? They watched my stand-up, invited me on, and Anthony and I just clicked immediately.
Damn.
But I got very lucky. But yeah, unfortunately, everything can be good and bad. Everything is a yin and yang, and Artie at times blamed me for getting kicked off the show, which is it's not really very cool when somebody who is has millions and millions of fans and is extremely famous wants to go after you. And he didn't go after me too hard, but just enough can mess you up.
Fuck.
And then you have their fans and the people that start harassing you and stalking you and coming at you, and it's like it's and they're especially evil, a lot of them, and it's which to this point now you can only do so much until it's just you don't even care anymore, like it just doesn't matter. But it's hard to build up that thick skin. Like you kind of have to pretend you have it as a comic, but then slowly you grow it, and because you can only say the same thing to somebody so many times. You're short, you're fat, whatever, blah blah blah, like whatever it is that they want to attack. So yeah, that it messed with me for like the first year because I was catching just this irregular amount of shit than somebody really deserved. And I didn't, and not even to make it like, oh, woe is me. I was very lucky to get this spot, but you get a spot like that. I'm not Jim Norton. I'm not Opie. I'm not their old cast. Nobody's ever going to like me as much as the show they loved.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a difficult thing. And I loved Anthony and I wanted to stay, but Crowder I started doing to promote our show because I'm like, this guy has 6 million subscribers, and they'd invite Anthony and I to come on, and I would just go because Anthony didn't want to, which I don't blame him. And they offered us both a job because they wanted to pick us up. And Anthony wants to move to South Carolina, so I said, well, I got to take advantage of it. I can't just wait around.
Can I ask something going back to just when you were on Anthony's show? Like there's sort of like this expectation or idea that if you can do stand up, you're good on radio or you're good on TV or whatever. Was there a learning curve for you? Because even just doing podcasting, dude, the first 50 podcasts I did, this whole thing has been so weird. And so it's not stand up, and it translate. Like, I think it's made me a better stand up because it forces you to listen and like be more engaged for long periods of time. But maybe something more like baseball where there's like these little, like you got to stay engaged the whole time, and then action happens and you like light up and go back to it. But it's not, I feel like there's a lot of stand-ups that are like, oh, I'd be great on a podcast. And then you get them on, like they're fucking, you sort of have to hang a little bit. Like doing a show like that's much different. Was that your experience too? Or
I had done a lot of radio just being a comic, and people always said like, oh, you should do radio, whatever it was. But yeah, there's a very big difference between hosting a show and then you have to look at ego. Like the reason why Johnny Carson and Howard Stern were so good is because they didn't have this insecurity where they were afraid to let somebody else be funny.
Mhm.
Like Howard Stern would let Gilbert Gottfried do whatever he wanted. When Artie first came on, when Norm Macdonald brought him, he would let him do whatever he wanted, which is how Artie got the gig, because he knew that if this guy was getting laughs, it was like, hey, did you see Gilbert on Howard Stern today? They didn't forget about Howard.
Yeah.
They just remembered it was the Howard Stern show and it was entertaining. His name's on it. And I think that's where a lot of people get a bit insecure. And I guess, like, yeah, you kind of learn to be a good listener, how to interview. Because before I wasn't asking the questions, so I would kind of like look up on the people who I met. And then I started bringing on people that I wanted to interview to this other show I had there called The Fair One, where it's like, well, I want to talk to like the rapper Esham. And I was on a record with DMC from Run DMC where it was just a comedy sketch. So I wanted to have him on.
Mm-hmm.
So we had him on twice. I brought in Rob Van Dam from ECW. I brought in, Eric Roberts. I always wanted to meet. So I would bring in these people that I really wanted to interview because they had always been fascinating to me. And that was always fun because just like Eric Roberts might not be an actor everybody knows, but he's in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just somebody that I wanted to talk to. So I always found it fun to like let your guard down and hear somebody else's story and then share yours. And yeah, but I mean, it's definitely a learning curve, especially when you're sitting in between two legends, but you have to know your spot. Like, you're not there to interrupt or be the star of the show. You're in there to throw in jokes or one-liners and keep the show flowing.
For sure.
And
And how
that's
is
the
that
same thing.
at Crowder? It's similar.
Yeah, I mean, they'll tell you that, my input's important and the way that I feel about everything, but it's just I throw in one-liners that I think are funny, and I have some opinions on politics, not as much as them. Um, but yeah, it's the same thing. Just sit back and wait for your moment, pick it wisely, and have fun. I mean, life is very, very short, and it feels shorter every day. And I'm grateful, and I didn't have gratitude for a lot of my life because I was just angry and using and bitter. The road will do that to you when you watch everybody else succeed, and it's like I had been on Comedy Central and some other shows, but it wasn't anything that would sell a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
So you just get bitter regardless of who you are. And everybody people can say they're not, but believe me, everybody can get there.
Was
Why aren't I this? Why aren't I that? And then you look and you go, well, he moved to LA and he stayed and he tried and he did this. And it's all different ways that people can take in this. And once I realized it was my fault, I started succeeding a lot more.
yeah. Well, one of the questions I got from a listener, your show, and then just a dude I went to school with is how's your experience been on LWC, and like how has it impacted the crowds that you're getting to do your stand up? And I guess my question off that would be, does it change how much you enjoy performing, having like a specific audience?
Yes and no. The money's better, obviously.
Yeah.
And before I wasn't selling out a theater in certain markets where I'm like, this is crazy. Like Matt and I were in a theater in Wichita, this really nice place called the Cotillion. And I just look out and it's just like, whatever, 1,000 people. And I'm the headliner. And I still can't wrap my head around that.
It's fucking
It's,
crazy.
yeah. But it's like, I also feel that I now have this obligation to try harder and put out, the best I can, as opposed to a lot of times before where I'm like, I'll just mail this in for 45 minutes, go back to the hotel and masturbate and cry. So like there's a difference now where, yeah, I feel like people had accepted me, and I knew it when people who I knew for a long time got real pissed when I started going on to they started getting pissed when I went on to Cumia because it was politics, and then they got real pissed that I went on to Crowder, and that's kind of when you start realizing that you're doing well, is when people are kind of shitty to you, out of nowhere, and it's fine. It is what it is. I don't know how else to word that, but that really is just kind of how like, oh, I'm starting to gain actual success.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't have experience in this, but I have to imagine the grind of like going and headlining without an audience just must be miserable. Like you're fucking in the middle of the ocean and the current just takes you. I mean, there's every possible thing that can go wrong. The bad weekend, the fucking there's the high school prom, all this shit. And like, I mean, you got married, right? And you got a family
Yeah.
now. It's like some of those responsibilities, like you can't just come back and be like, yeah, no, I didn't make anything this weekend. Like it's
I made $1,000 and I sold 200 in merch, and I drove because it was $80 cheaper than flying. Like, you can't, it's difficult to do.
mhm.
And it's one thing in a middle spot, because if you're going in as a feature act, there's no expectation at all. And people are probably going to enjoy you. You're not supposed to have made it or you're just on your way up.
Mhm.
But then if you're headlining, like, you have to prove it to an audience for 45 minutes. And sometimes you get really lucky where they'll paper the room and people will actually want tickets, and there's 300 people, 38 bought seats, but there's 300 people, and you do well and you get new fans. But I mean, there's also the, times you're sitting in front of 10 plumbers that are just in from out of town in like a Holiday Inn bar, and you're just on stage doing your stand up, and even if it feels good, it just doesn't, even
Dude,
if it goes well.
those can be fun. Like I think as long as it's not like what you're doing I mean, because I know some guys that are on the road and like that's their fucking
Oh yeah.
reality constantly.
Yeah,
I'm like, but every once in a while when you get that room, like I don't fucking care if there's 10 people or a
me
hundred
neither.
people. It's a lot of it's a different skill set for sure. But I think it's fun to like be able to be a little bit looser with stuff and just play around. It certain like stand up that's like always in a club or like always that like produced like these are my jokes, stand still and let me them deliver them to you. Like it's fucking boring. I don't know.
Oh, a lot of it can be for sure. Well, a lot of it is, it's kind of, yeah, you could say like hacky and sort of, I don't know, there is no thrill to it. And part of going on stage in front of a small audience like that, it humbles you, but it also treats you to be it makes you conversational, which is something that it cannot be, it's not a natural talent that you have on stage.
Oh
I've seen
yeah.
very few people that can be conversational with an audience. And I don't mean talking to them and having them talk back. I mean, they just feel that they're in a conversation with you because they're connecting with you on a certain level.
Yeah.
And you, that to me is something that you can only learn by going on the road, doing those gigs, learning how to translate what you've learned into a crowd of 300 people, like you were performing to 10, like you're at a dinner table. Like there's an intimacy that you have to be able to create. Like Bill Burr can create that intimacy in an arena.
It's fucking
There's
crazy.
there's very few people out there that can do that. But there's a few people that have had the ability and, have had their careers go that well. And of course, extreme talent. And it's because they're able to create an intimacy between them and the audience. And that's something that I feel on stage now when my fans come out, because they actually know who I am and they know what I talk about on the show and they know where I come from, and they know,
Hmm.
like, I don't even have to set up like I grew up in this part of Detroit. I grew up here. Like they know. I can just go into my stuff, talk about it,
And
and that's a wonderful. I'm just lucky right now, regardless of anything, and all the stuff that was good or bad has helped pave the way to whatever this is, and I'm writing sketches and doing stuff finally that I love. And it's like, that's what I always wanted to do. And SNL is just not SNL anymore. And I'm not saying that because it's like, oh, I want to be on that. I'm saying it because it sucks. Like when Shane Gillis got it, he was kicked off, like, and he's hilarious. And you just look at it and it's, every now and then you get some brilliant stuff, but for the most part, it just isn't what I grew up watching or have interest in doing. And now I'm on a show that actually produces the stuff that I write.
hmm I I don't know. I would argue that it's been that way for a while, dude. like I
Oh, SNL, yeah.
when like Sandler left when he did to go make movies, it's always been sort of that dynamic. Cause I don't know if good comedy is really meant to long term be made that way. It's
No, it's interesting because Adam Sandler came back after God knows how many years to host, and it was fantastic.
yeah.
And like almost every sketch was good. And I knew, I don't know, I didn't know her, but I knew the girl who wrote a particular sketch about, like we can, about a vacation destination in Italy where it's like, we can take you on a hike, we cannot make you like hiking. Like it's this whole thing where Adam Sandler is just pitching this, it was brilliant. But you see how when it's written and catered to certain people and their sense of humor, all of a sudden a lot of genius can come out. It's why, Alec Baldwin was brilliant on there, even though in the beginning everybody thought he was just this sort of very serious leading man, and it turned out he was great on the show.
Hmm.
Tom Hanks is like that. Like if he's going to be on there, you're probably going to get at least one or two good sketches that are just fun and funny. Like that's always been that way for what 30 years I think he's been going on there.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, there's a piece of it left, but for the most part, it's a corporate owned entity that pushes their narrative, and it's boring.
I couldn't agree more. Um, Before we transition just into our story time section, because I asked you to bring a drinking story on. Anyone who's listening or watching, if you can, comment or put any questions for us in the YouTube comments. And if you've enjoyed this episode so far, hit the thumbs up icon and the notifications bell to let us, or so that you find out when we get new content coming out. Doing all that, commenting, liking, hitting that bell, it helps with the YouTube algorithm. We really appreciate it. We're going to transition to the story section. Hold on.
It's story time. It's story time with Adam. Yeah, it's story time. It's story time with Adam and friends.
All right, let's hear it, buddy.
That's the greatest.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm trying to think of which one to do. Okay, I'll you know how long this can be. I think I've told this one on a podcast before. Can you give me 2 seconds?
Yeah.
I'm gonna rifle through something real quick because I wrote out like 3.
Yeah.
And I want to see which one is well, I'll do this one. I don't think I've ever done it on a podcast.
All
so
right.
I was my dad had just died, so I was like 18 I think at the time. And at the time I wore a lot of tracksuits that were made of velour, and I had 6 earrings, and I drove around in a fully loaded 98 Buick Regal
Okay.
that I had crashed actually into a tree the first day I got my driver's license. So we're hanging out at this dude's house, and this was on 8 Mile in Detroit, and it's right off of I-94, kind of in Harper Woods is what this city's called. It's not a bad city, but it borders the east side, which is, you know, especially at the time, a little rough, you could say. And we're hanging out in a backyard, and we used to always steal furniture. So this kid had this little house on 8 Mile where he lived with his parents, and it was 2 brothers actually. And the entire backyard was the most lavishly decorated thing, because we would just go into like the very, very wealthy neighborhoods and steal all their furniture. So like in the backyard, it was like these like really nice outdoor couches and like giant fountains and bird baths. And like it was basically like they had like this little bungalow, and then the backyard was like Saddam's palace. And we're hanging out, and I think I'm drunk and high and just doing what I do. And I'm like, do you guys have any whippets, like nitrous? And they're like, no, we don't. So I go inside, and I'm like asking his parents if they have any whipped cream. I'm like, I'll bring it right back. Because I was that kid where like somebody would like go to make ice cream in my house and like want to put a foam topping on it, and then it was just dripping like an old man's cock, just like just nothing would come out except like just liquid because I had sucked all the nitrous out of it. So I decided to drive up to this store, and I've been arrested many times, and I go inside the store and I grab like just this insane amount of whipped cream cans, like it was a gas station. And I grab like every whipped cream can they have, which is just like whatever this many is. And I walk up and I just put them on the counter, and the guy's like, how can I help you? And I'm like, what? I just need these. And he goes, yeah, are you gonna go spray cars with that or something? And I was like, no. I'm like, I just want it. He's like, okay, yeah, do you want it for the nitrous? Because everybody was doing, you know. And I was like, no, my school's having an ice cream social. And he goes, your summer school is having an ice cream social? So I'm like, yeah, whatever, just sell them to me. What do I do? He's like, I'm not selling them to you. And he's like putting them away. So I'm like, give me the whipped cream. And he's like, no. I'm like, give me the fucking whipped cream. So I started fighting with him to get the whipped cream cans from him, and I'm just hammered. So like as I'm walking out, I like pick up a lighter. I'm like, this is mine now. And I go outside, and right outside the doors, and he locks the door, is a display of soda 2 liters of Pepsi and Mountain Dew. So I just start taking the 2 liters and throwing them into my car and like yelling like, these are mine now, fuck you. I'm like giving him the finger and stuff, like just grabbing my balls, like throwing in like every 2 liter I could get. And then I look over, and at the stoplight is a cop. So I immediately stopped doing that, and I'm like, thank you for the 2 liters. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And then I get in, and I'm driving down the street to go back to my buddy's house, which, by the way, I could have just walked. It's like 9 houses down. So I'm now driving down side streets, and the cop's tailing me with his lights off. And they pull me over, and they're like, so what happened over there, Dave? Because there was this cop who knew me very well and had arrested me many times. And I said, nothing. I just bought some 2 liters is all. And they go, really? Because we got a call saying that somebody who looked just like you and matches your car and license plate got in a fight with the guy at the gas station over whipped cream cans. And I was like, yeah, I don't know anything about that. And they're like, have you been drinking? And I'm like, I know. I don't think so. No, I've been drinking. So I get out, they find 2 open 40 ounces of malt liquor under the driver's seat of my car. One was called 45 and one was St. Ides, which, by the way, didn't even know I had them there. Just must have put them back there one night. And they search my whole car, where they find just like, $80 worth of 2 liters that I had taken in a mad rage over not being able to get whipped cream cans of nitrous. They arrest me, impound my car, and it was like 2 days later, my girlfriend calls and was like, what happened the other night? And I was embarrassed at this point because I had been in rehab and mental hospitals. So I was like, nothing. I just went home. Why? And she's like, well, look at the paper. And in the newspaper, it said drunken soda pop drinker with my name on it, describing my car and the liquor that I had underneath my driver's seat. And it was one of my DUIs.
Jesus Christ.
So that was one of many. That one's I don't think I've ever told that one on the air, but that'll be in my book. I'm writing a book of
Fuck yeah.
13. Yeah, it's rough to rehatch everything, but once you put it on paper and let somebody like Matt McClowry read it and be brutally honest, and he's so straight edge that it's fun to have somebody look at that and be like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know.
It's so funny. Dude, right towards the end of me, like, still getting fucked up, it was maybe like the last 6 months of me using, I got into nitrous really bad, but I didn't know that they sold them in the cartridges. Like,
the Whippets.
Yeah, I thought they only fucking sold them as whipped cream. So I would go to like, I was literally doing like 20 cans of this shit a day. Like, I had a whipped cream habit, and it was my way of like, I wouldn't drink during the daytime. I would just drink at night. So it was like, I would get high or whatever, take pills during the day to like get me to the nighttime. Yeah. But I started doing Whippet, and I'd get like 20 of these fucking cans and just go back to back to back to, and like, if you kept it rolling, it would just, you'd start like kind of seeing sound and shit. Like, it was
of course. Yeah.
And I would just be driving around listening to Baby Got Back. And the funniest thing was you do that shit.
Sparkles.
Yeah, dude. I was just flying. Like, and I didn't know you can black out and pass out and shit from that. But
oh yeah, we used to make a guy do balloons just to watch him do it. It was my friend we called Dumpster, and he would honestly just do a balloon and like fish out and like have a seizure and then get up and be like, that was awesome. And then he would do another one and just like have a seizure.
It's fucking crazy, man.
But anyway, sorry.
No, you're good. And I just remember, like you were saying, that dribble, like you're done with that can, and so I would like I had like a pile of them in the back of my truck, fucking there was so because it was 20 a day or whatever. So anytime I'd take a turn, there'd be a little bit of nitrous left in the can still, and they would just start hitting each other like fucking going all over the place. But then I'd eventually
they're still full of the liquid. That's the best part too. They're not even emptied out, so you know what you're for. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. It was just so stupid, man. Like that. It of all the things, like I haven't touched anything for I don't know 10 years now, and that's the one thing. Like if I had to go back. It was just so much fucking fun. Like you,
oh, dude, it was always well, and they used to sell. You know, like somebody would know who knew where they got it. Some corrupt dentist or something at the time was trying to keep his business going. They'd have the tanks, but also they would have tanks where people would go and buy nitrous, which was meant for cars, so it was just filled with sulfur. So basically, you're getting balloons filled with poison, you know, and nitrous. And I remember that because it was like, you'd be looking at it like, is that a medical tank or is that a nitrous car tank? Because you never wanted to get the sulfur stuff because it could, I mean, any of it could kill you, but that could definitely kill you a lot easier.
Yeah.
But it was so popular at raves. I mean, especially this was like the late 90s, maybe 2000 in Detroit, where raves were huge, and every single one of them said that DJ Jazzy Jeff would be there that weekend. He never showed once. Or they'd be like, yeah, Bad Boy Bill is going to be here at the Firehouse on Mount Elliott, or whoever was popular at the time. Like, oh, really? Daft Punk is playing in the middle of the ghetto for $30? It's incredible.
Of course.
Let's go. And like, yeah, a lot of my friends would be selling nitrous right out front, where, you know, you're selling them for $5 a balloon and just making a fortune. And then I'm buying acid and selling that. Then my friend's buying E for $10 a pill and then flipping it for 35. So it was always, you know, E was one that I didn't do as much as everybody else, but it was a different time where it wasn't MDMA. It was MDMA mixed with God knows what. So you'd take a pill and you'd be like, this is mostly speed. Or you'd take a pill and be like, this is definitely a heroin-filled E pill. You know, you never knew what was going in your body. It was just like it had a Pikachu on it or a butterfly, and you just take that and hope it didn't kill you. And then you go to a rave, and I'd be like, how much is the bottle of water? And they're like $40 just because you knew you needed it not to die.
Fucking nuts, man.
Yeah.
All right, I got one bonus question before getting you out of here. This is from Cheeseburger Cavalier.
Okay.
I think you might know of him.
I know him. He's an awesome dude, yeah.
Nice. Favorite Rodney Dangerfield joke, and relatively in short terms, what was it like making your own movie?
Okay. The first one is, people say I'm an ugly guy. Every time I get into an elevator, the operator looks at me and says, basement? It's just so all his jokes. That's like my favorite. That, and my wife likes to talk after sex. The other night she called me from a motel. And I remember him doing that on Carson in like the 70s, and Carson just losing his mind laughing.
Did you know his story about those one-liners? Like how he came up with them? With the duffel bag?
Yep. Yeah.
It's fucking crazy.
His whole story, like if anybody's listening and reads a book on him or anything, like he started as almost a kid, you know, his name was Jack Roy. And then when he had a family and children, he sold aluminum siding. And then he was like, you know what, I want to go do stand-up again. And I mean, he started in it was like his mid-40s, late 40s, and just exploded.
So crazy. And that whole time, I guess, while he was selling, like he couldn't do stand-up, but he would still write jokes, and he just threw those, like they write small piece of paper, threw a one-liner in a duffel bag, and then when he
eventually it just added up.
Yeah. He had an act in a bag. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
So nuts. All right, and then the movie, what was it like for you?
It was good. I mean, I'm really happy that I have a movie out there, and people love it and people hate it, and that's what I like about it. Is it's I made a movie for 7 grand in 2014, 13. Then it came out in 15. It was cool. I mean, I've always wanted to make a movie. I got to figure out how to make a movie on set. I got to figure out how to make a movie for nothing, get people to act in it. And it was kind of my story, which is why I enjoyed it. It was obviously amplified, like there's deaths in it and like people getting shot up and all kinds of stuff. But it's a story that's true to Detroit about white boys that go into the hood and experience stuff that really nobody else does. Because that's just where it was, where I grew up, where I grew up right on the border, where there's this fine, very, very fine line between, I mean, there's literally a street called Mack Avenue where one side is at that time was extraordinarily ghetto and the other side is just money and all the auto executives, Fortune 500 people, and the other side is just complete and utter ghetto. And growing up in that environment where I could be in somebody's house who had 2 pools in a mansion in one day, and then be in somebody's house whose parents sold crack and that's what they did to make a living in one day. Just depends on which friend's house I was at.
It's fucking crazy.
And so that's kind of what I wrote about, was the complete the complete difference between the two worlds where you would be and what it was like even when they go into the ghetto, all of a sudden it's nightfall, they go to this liquor store. We went to the one where I used to buy liquor illegally. In the movie, there's a guy who's a homeless dude named why am I blanking? Spider with a Y. And that was his real name. Like, he would come up to you outside of this place called Piccadilly and be like, what can I get you guys? You guys want you get some MD 2020, some 40s, whatever. What do you want? I'll suck your dick. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? And he'd be like, yeah, he's like, I can get you like a 30 pack and, suck your cock, play with your balls. And you're like, no, just the liquor would be fine. Like, all right, but the offer's on the table. Like, he claimed he used to be a roadie. And like he would always offer you sexual services when you just wanted him to go buy you beer.
Line.
So I threw that into the movie, and it's like people think that's exaggerated. It's like, no, that was pretty much how that dude was. Like, it was a real guy who called himself Spider with a Y, who just got lost on heroin and lived outside of a liquor store and blew people for drugs. But so I just took these parts of it, and it was exciting for me to do because we didn't have a budget. I had to go film the parts that I needed to be the hood in the hood. Like, the whole drug dealing house scene is in a grow house, that was abandoned. It was, there's scenes in the movie, like everything that seems very, very ghetto was very, very, I mean, I was standing outside dressed like a juggalo in white face paint and white and black clown makeup, wearing like a big gold chain with a hatchet man on the end, and I'm just holding an AK. And there's a little girl, I'll never forget it, rides by on a bike and it's like, hi. Didn't even startle her in that neighborhood. And it was cool because it took 2 different groups of people to make that movie, because it was an equal opportunity offender. It made fun of both sides just as much. Yeah. And that's what I wanted it to be, was to be a bit of reality from both sides and to make fun of both sides, because I loved hood movies. Yeah. So it was cool to put a sort of, the way that I saw it was a Dazed and Confused meets Menace to Society, because it was the 2 sides in the extremes of what I grew up with. So it was like if those kids ended up in the hood, and that's exactly, I think I succeeded in making it. And I also know parts I don't like and stuff that I would have changed now, but I'm writing another one and I'm going to do it again, because it was one of the highlights of my life, honestly, was just making something that I cared about. So it was a cool experience. And we shot it in 13 days. We barely slept. And we just made this thing, and it was fun, man.
Fuck yeah! I watched some of it. I watched the start of it. I got distracted, but the fucking gas station scene.
That's real. That's a 100% true story. That happened to that guy, dude. When he told me that story, I was like, will you be in my movie? And he's like, yeah, man, I'll be in your movie. And he's like, do I have to use my name? And I'm like, no, but your face will be it. But all right. So he tells that story about the time he was in jail for cocaine that he got busted with in the early 80s. And the dude named Cast
so
Iron,
aggressive.
dude, he punches it. He goes, we were playing basketball, and this dude, he was gay. His name was Cast Iron. And he walk up, and there's these guys talking about it. They got gold chains and they selling stuff. And oh man, how they making all this money on the side in prison. So Cast Iron just boom, punches this dude, knocks him out, pulls his pants down, sucks his dick on the spot. I was running so fast, the basketball was still dribbling without me. I was fucking, because when I met him through my brother's like, dude, you got to tell him the story. I'm crying. Because the dude's like, I think at the time he's probably like 60, maybe like mid 50s, you know, and just he's been around, nicest dude. And you would have never guessed that he had done time, and he had done some hard time. But that story, I'm like, dude, please. And he was happy to do it. So like even when he tells it, it's so convincing. But I just thought him telling a kid that randomly who's just trying to get gas for his new car.
So I was like fucking shocked when I was like, what is happening right now?
That's what I try to make it, where you don't expect what comes at you.
Oh yeah.
You know,
and his brother at the start of it.
That's one of my best friends in life. That's my buddy Jimmy, who I thought about moving to LA with. Yeah.
So fucking funny, dude. Oh my God.
He was playing a version of his older brother. That's
there's no way that was anything besides someone's real older brother that you were making fun of. Like as soon as I saw it, it's like
100%. And that's why you kind of not that there is an ending to ruin in a way, but it's like, you know, you do see the love of his brother later on, but that's just how he is, because he's sitting there in a shirt that just says, this guy loves cock, with an arrow pointed to whoever, and at this point he's sitting next to his mom. And I remember when we were filming it, we needed another camera battery, and Jimmy's like, I'll just run up, I think there's like a Walmart like 2 miles from here, I'll be right back. And like as he's walking out with the battery, he like sees his reflection in his car, and he realizes he was just walking around Walmart and this guy loves the cock shirt, and nobody said anything to him.
So funny.
But that's exactly who his brother was, like just kind of a dick and a bully, and that's who we based it on.
God damn. That's fucking great. Well, dude, before you go, is there anything you want to plug, like your own dates or I mean, it's not the show, anything you got? I don't know what you're pushing right now, but anything that my audience can check out if they're interested.
Yeah, just go to davelandau.com and you can get my movie, all kinds of stuff that I've done. Yeah, check it out through that, and you can see different shirts. You can check out Louder with Crowder every Monday through Thursday on Rumble, YouTube, wherever you can get a podcast, or Blaze TV. If you buy this subscription, you do get an hour of overtime almost every episode. That's just a lot of fun if you happen to be if you want news that isn't completely left wing. So yeah, that's about it. I would say check out Louder with Crowder. And I would also say check out the Anthony Cumia show. It's a hilarious show, and it's still on the air, and I do miss that dude and doing that show. And yeah, check that out. We have a lot of videos up that, you know, people will enjoy.
Hell yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share this podcast with a friend and rate and subscribe to us. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure God, I can't speak. So please make sure to hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any new content. And if you liked it, hit that like button, throw in some comments for Dave or myself. And as always, follow us on Instagram at FNFpod. We're going to leave you with Jaga.
I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. My wave pool, my wave wave pool. Welcome to my wave pool, my 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 wave pool.